A couple of years ago, I saw a wonderful video by Yvonne from the EV Stock channel, which described Tesla's lithium supply chain for investors and Tesla fans alike. A brief look at the footage running in the background is all it takes to see that lithium had to travel halfway around the world till it reached Tesla's American-made cars. Since then, a million things have changed. EV sales took off, and battery storage is the next hot thing. Tesla added factories around the world, and other companies grew as well. The price of lithium skyrocketed, and the market value of lithium companies did the same. Countries began viewing lithium as strategic and started nationalizing their lithium production. And mostly, the Inflation Reduction Act arrived, which started a tsunami of investments into the U.S. and its neighbors, in all aspects of battery supply from lithium mining to making and selling EVs. Since Tesla recently started building a lithium refining plant in Corpus Christi, I decided to revisit the North American lithium scene. In this video, I'll show the great changes that are taking place. I will try to determine whether industry experts are right, and the limiting factor is mining. Or maybe Elon Musk is right by saying it's refining. I will try to show what lies ahead. And finally, I'll break hard to the left and dive into history to show how today's mining regulations and norms are in many ways unchanged from how things were in the California gold rush. Nothing here is investment advice. Do your own research, and full disclosure, I am long Tesla stock and hold a small investment in a battery raw materials company. If you like my videos, please like and subscribe, and consider supporting me on Patreon. My Patreon supporters are what makes this channel possible, so huge thanks to all of you. You can also support me by visiting my merch store to get your own 33 Raptors on my tail, Make Twitter Great Again, and Cybertruck heat map t-shirts. Now buckle up and get ready, because we'll see disruption in the making, and disruptions are never boring. Chapter 1. Aligning all vectors. As described in the EV Stock Channel's video, the supply chain for Tesla's 2170 batteries, which were made by Panasonic in Giga Nevada, was long and cumbersome. Lithium is conventionally obtained from mining lithium-rich spodumene rocks or by drying lithium-rich brines in evaporation pools, and the lithium for Panasonic's batteries originated from both methods. Panasonic's deals included 3 companies, Livent, Ganfeng, and Albemarle. Livent's lithium was sourced from brines in Argentina, and Ganfeng's and Albemarle's lithium was mined in Australia. In my recent deep dive into Tesla's rare earth elements-free permanent magnets, we saw that China has a stronghold on processing rare earth elements. Unsurprisingly, the same goes for lithium, as most lithium refining is performed in China. So no matter where Tesla's lithium was sourced, instead of going directly to Nevada, it first went to China for refining into lithium hydroxide. After refining, the lithium traveled to Japan to a company called Sumitomo, which makes cathodes for Panasonic, and from there, the cathodes are shipped to Nevada. This geographically dispersed supply chain holds downsides for several parties. Transporting heavy commodities around the world is expensive, so for Panasonic and Tesla, it adds cost to the batteries, and either lowers Tesla's margins or adds to the price of its cars. It also pollutes a lot, both from ships carrying the lithium halfway around the world and from Chinese refineries, which usually use dirty methods, so it adds to the carbon footprint of the cars. It also creates yet another dependency on China, which in case things go sour, they can use to completely halt EV production in the West. Note that this isn't just theoretical, as when China and Japan quibbled about fishing rights in the South Sea, China almost halted rare earth elements supply to Japan, which put tremendous pressure on Japan to comply with China's fishing rights demands. If they did this once, they can do it again, which creates a strategic threat for both Tesla and the USA. So Tesla, Panasonic, environmentalists, and even the USA all want the supply chain localized. Yet for years, this didn't happen because demand wasn't high enough and economies of scales remained elsewhere. In other words, Chinese refineries were inexpensive enough to make investing in refineries in America not worth its while. And it's not even a case of being static. It's a case of going backward. In 1995, 37% of the world's lithium supply came from the USA, but the arrival of stringent environmental regulations in the USA made it difficult to establish and maintain large-scale lithium mining operations and to obtain permits for building refineries. With the rise of EVs, the price of lithium soared, and things started changing. For example, Tesla started checking on clean extraction of lithium from clays, and a company called Controlled Thermal Resources started work on recovering lithium from geothermal brine under the Salton Sea, a project well known due to GM buying into it with much fanfare. However, this clearly wasn't enough, and the U.S. remained behind. But then the IRA arrived. It aligned all the vectors towards localization, and all hell broke loose. Chapter 2. The IRA's Clean Little Secret. Since the IRA was announced, investments started pouring into all stages of battery supply, from mining raw battery materials to making and selling in-product EVs. In other words, although the Inflation Reduction Act is far from perfect, there's no denying that it is extremely effective in building a North American battery supply chain. Call me a skeptic, but I'm so used to politicians wasting taxpayer dollars on bullshit causes that I was surprised to see how well thought of most of the details of the IRA were. Digging a bit deeper, however, I was surprised to learn something that isn't often discussed. While the Inflation Reduction Act was pushed by the current administration, it turns out that the core of its battery strategy wasn't determined by politicians, and it's not even a partisan thing. Like most legislation nowadays, the IRA contains lots of political give and take, but the crux of its battery policy lies on the National Blueprint for Lithium Batteries 2021 to 2030, which was developed by the Federal Consortium for Advanced Batteries, FCAB. The FCAB was launched on September 10, 2020 as a joint effort by the Departments of State, Energy, Commerce, and Defense, with the mission of securing a U.S. battery and technology supply chain by 2030. To achieve this mission, the FCAB set 5 lofty goals, which were directly reflected in the National Blueprint for Lithium Batteries and later in the IRA. These goals were 1. Securing access to raw and refined materials. This goal is where all the new mines that are announced nowadays come from. 2. Supporting the growth of a U.S. materials processing base. This goal is behind at least 5 lithium refineries, which were announced for the U.S., including Tesla's in Corpus Christi, as well as many processing plants for other metals. 3. Stimulating the U.S. electrode cell and pack manufacturing sectors, which brought hordes of battery factory announcements. 4. Enabling recycling at scale, which helped Redwood Materials expansion and brought other recycling plants to the U.S. 5. Finally, maintaining a battery leadership by strongly supporting R&D and STEM education. The National Blueprint for Batteries is an interesting read. I'll leave a link below. The FCAB was launched in the previous administration, and its work was set into law by the current one. It seems to me like we're given a show, where on-camera Dems support their bill and reps oppose it. But in fact, it's mostly a bipartisan product of professional work, the way it should be in matters of great importance. I don't know about you, but to me, this gives hope. Chapter 3. The Limiting Factor.
Hi Elon, I'm Josh Phillips, long-term retail investor. My question's about battery-grade lithium supply in the next 10 years. Lithium experts all agree that mines are just not coming online fast enough to meet battery supply. And actually, Drew Baglino pointed this out recently. Some mines take 10 years plus to be permitted. So what's Tesla's plans to get more supply of lithium at the mine level outside of refining, but also at a deeper level than a traditional offtake? Because as we know, he who controls the spice controls the universe.
Sure. I actually think that the industry analysis is incorrect, and the constraint is fundamentally that of processing. Now, our refinery in Corpus Christi that we're building is primarily oriented towards refining spodumene, of which there is a truly vast amount in the world. I think about 3/4 of our lithium comes from Australia. And frankly, you could increase the rate at which the mines are operating, and the limiting factor is not how fast can you mine, but how fast can you process. So the mines are only going to produce ore at the rate at which refineries can handle the ore, or it's pointless. So I think, my opinion, and obviously I could be wrong about this, but is that it's really not about the lithium ore. Lithium is extremely common. Lithium is everywhere. In every country's got lithium. It's not like oil. So lithium is one of the most common elements on Earth. But taking the lithium ore and refining it to battery grade is extremely difficult because the purity levels required for a battery are extremely high. If you have even a small impurity, then you will degrade the life of the cell dramatically. So you need ultra-pure battery grade lithium, and that's why our focus is on refining as opposed to mining. Thank you.
EVs and storage need batteries, and batteries need lithium. Despite the arrival of alternatives such as sodium batteries, demand for lithium will continue to grow exponentially in the foreseeable future, and there's a big risk of supply not keeping up. As Josh Phillips said, he who controls the spice controls the universe. But what is the limiting factor? Was Josh right in fearing that mining won't keep up, or was Elon correct in saying that refining is the real bottleneck? They both were. I'll explain. But first, I need to set things straight, which brings us to Chapter 3A, the real reasons behind Tesla's refinery. When searching for the limiting factor, some might think that the proof is in the pudding, and that if Tesla went into refining instead of mining, this means that this is what their experts expect the limiting factor to be. Unfortunately, those thinking this would be wrong. It's true that Tesla decided to go into refining because it fears a shortage of refined lithium, but the reason isn't necessarily lack of global refineries. It goes much deeper. Consider the following. Many companies around the world, from startups to global giants, are currently into lithium extraction. Tesla isn't dependent on any single entity, and if extraction becomes a limiting factor, Tesla can negotiate with different companies. It is possible they'll have to pay extra for a larger share of the pie, but they will get their lithium feedstock. Fewer companies, however, are into refining battery-grade lithium, and most of them are in China. In case refining becomes a limiting factor, Tesla will have fewer companies to negotiate with. More importantly, with 3 factories besides Giga Shanghai, Tesla will survive a possible trade war, but not if they rely on China for their lithium. Going into refining will enable Tesla to control its destiny, and I believe that's the main reason they did it. You might think that the chances of China limiting supply of refined lithium are small, only they aren't. I already told how tension on fishing rights had China throttling supplies of rare earth elements to Japan, but this isn't an exception. For example, in 2020, Australia's Prime Minister ordered an inquiry into the origins of the pandemic, after which China blocked major Australian imports such as coal, timber, and wine. The embargo on coal has unofficially lifted already, and 2 weeks ago China announced it would lift the embargo on timber, but these things do happen. I'm not even saying who's right and who's wrong, just that if a superpower holds you by the testicles, it would be stupid of you to think they will never squeeze it if it serves their interests. So, first and foremost, it's a matter of limiting existential threats. But putting China aside, if extraction becomes a limiting factor which would slow the transition to sustainable energy, why doesn't Tesla do that as well? The answer is that it would take a lot of effort, but won't necessarily bring meaningful results. If Tesla goes into the early stage of extraction, which is exploration, there's a chance they would find a new mine or untapped brine source. However, the rising price of lithium brought many companies into this field, so new sources are and will be found even without Tesla. Moreover, it's permitting that's the real problem. So whatever sources they found wouldn't start production for years. For example, 2 years ago, I was approached by someone on Twitter who had properties containing insane amounts of battery metals, as well as rare earth elements, and asked me whether I could get him in touch with someone in Tesla. He then produced geological surveys and sample tests to back his claims, so I managed to help him get in touch. But 2 years later, and as far as I know, no permitting has been given. So going into exploration won't help much, but the same goes for extraction itself. Imagine that Tesla buys an existing deposit, puts in a lot of effort, and finds a way to extract lithium twice as fast as legacy companies do. In this case, all they would achieve is to double the output of a single project, one of many worldwide. Hardly worth the effort and the PR baggage that comes with mining. With refining, though, things are much clearer. There are currently very few battery-grade lithium refineries. 6 in China, 4 in Australia, 1 in Argentina, and 1 in the USA. Once the Inflation Reduction Act arrived, a handful of new refineries were announced in America and Australia. But regardless, if Tesla adds a single refinery, this will increase global capacity much more than if they go into mining. And considering that only 6% of spodumene is lithium, refining 100,000 tons lithium sourced from Canadian mines will save transporting 1.6 million tons of spodumene from Canada to China, a huge saving in both costs and emissions. 3B. So what is the limiting factor? If trade wars arrive, there's no question that the answer is refining. Too few refineries are currently active outside of China, and it'll take some time before Western refining keeps up with demand. In fact, I think Elon's bluffing, and it's Western, not global, refining capacity that he's worried about. But due to Chinese connections, he can't say this out loud. This is also why Tesla announced a rare earth elements-free permanent magnet motor. If you haven't watched my video, there's a link below. I think Elon's bluffing, but let's take him at face value. So trade wars aside, what is the limiting factor in a benign situation where everything hums smoothly? Let's hear former Pilbara Minerals boss Ken Brinston, interviewed on the Rock Stock channel by Rockstars Howard Klein and Rodney Hooper of RK Equity.
But you said mining's the hardest. Elon Musk is saying refining's the hardest, and that's where the margin is. So you are outwardly disagreeing with Elon Musk.
Yeah, I'd love to know who's advising Elon, because I couldn't disagree more, basically, with the position that he's taken. Refining capacity is not an issue globally. Sure, there's a concentration of refining capacity in China today, but I'm equally optimistic that that capacity is going to be built out elsewhere around the world. And bear in mind, to build chemical capacity, realistically, something like 18 months to 24 months. But a mine is measured virtually in decades as to the delivery of its capacity. And that mismatch cannot be solved in short order. So I feel like he's either a genius talking his own book because he wants us all to believe that there is excess raw material, or in fact, he's been poorly advised because, I just cannot agree with that thesis.
I think the problem is, Ken, is in first principles, which is what Elon Musk thinks in, there is lithium everywhere, which no one's disputing. What we're seeing practically on the ground is, as you mentioned, I think 2022, there was less investment upstream than there was in 2021, if that's possible to believe. And everyone says it's everywhere, but I'm not going to fund it and I'm not going to participate in it. So Tesla's not funding it, and neither are others. They say, I don't want to be a miner, but it's everywhere and someone else is going to do it. And don't worry, it's everywhere and it's going to be presented downstream. So I think that's where the disconnect comes in, is that they think someone else will take care of it and they don't permit anything when they do something, and they deal in first principles, solving powertrains and doing those other things. But mining, as you know, from the coal face, as it were, from the lithium face, is much tougher.
Yeah, exactly. Lithium itself is not rare, but the confluence of events that make a sensible and timely development are. So the right location for the product, the right volume, the right quality within the right time frame, that's what's rare.
The industry says it's extraction, and Elon says it's refining, but admits he could be wrong. I think they're both right, and it's mostly a matter of timing. Now, let's listen to Keith Phillips, CEO of Piedmont Lithium.
I hate bringing this up, but every time Elon Musk gets on an investor call now, he's talking, okay, we need refining plants for lithium. We need more, we need more, we need more. You're in the industry. Is there enough people answering the call in that regard?
Yeah, there are. It's hard. I mean, fundamentally, he's right. We do need more lithium refining capacity. More importantly, I think we need more lithium mining capacity. If you don't have the raw material, there's nothing to refine. So we need both. Tesla's obviously building some of their own conversion capacity. They've talked about that. We're going to build 2 plants. Albemarle's going to build a big plant in South Carolina. Livent's expanding. There are others with plans here in the U.S. and Canada and Australia, for that matter. So I think it's coming. The fundamental barrier, though, you can build a lithium hydroxide plant in a couple of years. It takes 8 or 10 or 15 years to get a mine from kind of first drill hole to production. And that's a barrier. That's going to take time.
In a way, it's a bit like supply and demand for EVs. If I asked you a year ago what's greater, the supply of EVs or the demand for them, you would probably point out that Tesla and others have long waiting lines, so demand outstrips supply. And if I asked you now, however, chances are that you'd show that waiting times are short and prices went down, so supply currently lags behind. The main problem is we're comparing two exponentially growing curves, so even a small error in our predicting one of them could bring huge mismatches. What's worse, things are dynamic, so even if we're spot on in our predictions, a small hiccup in one of the curves, such as fear of recession currently pushing down the demand for cars, is enough to ruin our predictions. Back on topic. And instead of consumer demand for cars, let's talk refinery demand for lithium. There are too few refineries outside of China. And if we want to localize supply chains or remove dependency on China, we need to open more refineries closer to where lithium is mined. Also, Elon is right that lithium is abundant in Earth's crust and many projects are underway. However, current projects are not enough to meet expected demand, so additional mining is clearly needed. New mining projects are starting up, but so are new refineries. And while it takes 5 to 10 years to get mines permitted and then ramped up, it only takes 5 to get refineries to full speed. And even if the curves match, huge hiccups in supply are underway. In North America, lithium is mostly extracted in what's called the North American Lithium Triangle, an area that spans Quebec, Ontario, and North Carolina. A lot more lithium, however, is expected in the South American Lithium Triangle, which spans the world's second largest lithium supplier, Chile, the fourth largest supplier, Argentina, and Bolivia. A few weeks ago, Chile decided to nationalize all lithium projects. While details are still unclear, what is clear is that all projects will require 51% ownership by Chile and will have to comply with more stringent requirements. Also clear is that this slows new investments in expanding Chile's production, and that when Chile previously did this to copper extraction, this severely hit their copper output. If nationalization slows Chile's rate of growth, extraction probably will be the limiting factor, regardless of all other reasons. I should add that Mexico is also nationalizing its production, but they're still a small player, and while Argentina is ramping up, they do not have a free trade agreement with the USA, so Argentinian lithium does not fall under the IRA. Chile's nationalization of lithium was announced in May, but it doesn't stop there. Also in May, two large lithium companies, Livent and Allkem, merged to form a top 3 giant. This will enable them to expand their extraction projects, which helps supply, but also to grow their refining capabilities, which helps with demand. Also in May, a few days ago, ExxonMobil announced that it too is entering the lithium business. As Simon Moores of Benchmark Minerals Intelligence said, "It's a gold rush on steroids. You've got the emergence of this green revolution where you have to build infrastructure from scratch. It's not just China this time, it's North America at the same time as China, and Europe at the same time as China." So with the future of oil looking dark, ExxonMobil too wants a share of the pie. I always saw mining as boring, but digging a bit under the crust, pun intended, revealed a vibrant and exciting industry. The field is ultra-dynamic with new entrants, mergers, acquisitions, lots of new technologies, and very high stakes. And while it's unclear what the limiting factor will be in any given year, what is certain is that both extractors and refiners will have their hands full for several years to come. It's like a good action series, and I'll have my popcorn ready as I follow the developments on my favorite lithium channels. As usual with disruptions, the action has just begun. And now, let's enter my time machine and go back in time to the days of the California Gold Rush. I would now like to introduce you to the sponsor of this video, FE Battery Metals, a Canadian mineral exploration company trading in the US OTC venture market with the ticker FEMFF. This story was extremely interesting, as it took me down a fascinating rabbit hole into the world of mining. As always, nothing here is financial advice, and always do your own research. Imagine that it's 1848, the California Gold Rush had barely started, and you get early news that gold was discovered. You're quick to react and decide to start mining. But where do you start? California's big, and most areas don't have gold, so it's best to head to regions where gold was already found, such as the western slope of the Sierra Nevada, later named Gold Country. Where gold is found, there's usually more around, so the safest bet is to start mining at properties adjacent to the largest findings, and since science can increase your odds, you hire a geologist to prospect these properties and tell you which ones to claim. The geologist picks properties, but the land is public. If you start mining, is that even legal? Turns out it is, because when the gold rush began, the gold fields were almost lawless, and gold was free for the taking with no private property, no licensing fees, and no taxes. The miners informally adapted Mexican mining laws, which attempted to balance the rights of early arrivers at a site with later arrivers. A prospector could stake a claim, and that claim was valid as long as the mine was being actively worked. If a mine was abandoned or not worked upon, other miners would claim jump the land, and the first to stake would get the rights. Staking literally means driving stakes into the ground at the corners of your property to mark its boulders. Late in the gold rush, good properties were hard to find, but if you were an early mover and were first to stake promising areas around a large existing discovery, your chance of becoming insanely rich was high. Fast forward 175 years to our days, and I was startled to find out how little has changed in mineral mining. In fact, it's much easier to list what has changed. First, mining is no longer a free-for-all. When staking claims to mineral rights, you need to get approved before you can start mining, and you won't get approved unless you provide geological reports indicating that the property is promising. You pay local and federal fees just for applying, and annual fees once the rights are yours. Companies even need a social license to operate, which further reduces the number of players. The second thing that changed is technology. Geologic reports are much better at predicting which properties are worth mining, and mining itself is easier and safer than ever before. Finally, once the mine is depleted, you can't just abandon it. Mine closure involves costly and detailed procedures to restore the environment, with countless steps such as removing facilities, mitigating safety hazards, removing toxic waste, cross-training employees, and more. Otherwise, things are pretty much the same, and most regions still require you to physically drive stakes into the ground. But if you're first to prospect and to stake areas around a large deposit, then once your application is approved, you're good to go. This brings us to FE Battery Metals, a Canadian mineral exploration company focused on identifying, exploring, and advancing early-stage lithium projects in Canada. When just offered this sponsorship, I did some preliminary checks on them and was glad to see that their main property is in the James Bay region, which I knew is smack in Canada's lithium triangle. A detailed map of the area shows two huge lithium operations in purple, both owned by a JV between Sayona and Piedmont Minerals. Here, we have the giant Authier open pit mine. And here, their North American Lithium operation, which should also include a lithium processing plant and is under contract to supply Tesla with spodumene concentrate for the next few years. Beyond that, all areas marked in turquoise are FE Battery Metals, which moved fast and staked claims for many properties surrounding Authier and NAL. While even a brute force land grab could limit Authier's growth, there's possibly more to it here, as the company's board includes geologist Jody Gibson, which was awarded the Yukon Prospectors Association 2020 Prospector of the Year award and has made several large discoveries. My main problem with FE was that as a small company, they have no chance of competing on production costs with giants such as Sayona and Piedmont. But apparently that isn't their intention. Upon proving that their properties contain commercial quantities of battery-quality lithium, they plan to either sell the mines or get fully swallowed by Sayona or another giant. This is somewhat like built-to-flip startups, which develop new ideas and then exit by selling the company to Google or Microsoft. Another analogy is fossil fuel exploration companies, who find an oil or gas field and are then bought by energy giants. Another interesting point is that if FE are successful, their properties should be more valuable for Sayona than similar properties located elsewhere, as having more lithium to mine would enable Sayona to delay costly mine closure once its own mines are depleted. Elon recently said that if advertising is accurate, informative, and entertaining, then it provides value and merges with content creation. I hope I succeeded in that. Nothing here is financial advice, and always do your own research. And a big thank you to FE Battery Metals for sponsoring this video. I found this one fascinating. That's it, guys. Let me know what you think. Will the bottleneck be extraction, refining, or is it too dynamic to know? Will Chile's nationalizing production hurt its supply, or will they manage to do this without hurting growth? Do you want me to do another video sometime in the future, tackling this from a different angle? Let me know. I read all your comments. A super thank you for the super thanks to Dave J., and to my latest patrons, Cindy B., Daryl J., and Siobhan Z. And to all my patrons, you guys rock.